So for this soul story investigation, I am so excited to bring you here to Llywernog mine, situated in the western Cambrian mountains of mid Wales, quite close to Aberystwyth. Now this site, you can see I visited it during Halloween week. It's a site that was first opened in 1742 when lead ore was first discovered and worked on and off here till about 1908. By 1973 the mine was derelict and it was left abandoned for 50 to 60 years until it was renovated by its new owner and turned into a tourist attraction, the Silver Mountain Experience. It really is an amazing place. It's got original buildings dating from the 1860s. All the buildings here are grade 2 listed, and the top of the site where the mine shaft is now even classified as a scheduled ancient monument. The original old mine count houses here, there are tools, there are equipment, there are mining documents, there are original water wheels made from local foundries. It is a really significant mine, and of course it comes with its own soul stories. We have some experience of the soul stories here and the activity that is in this site from our visit in the summer holiday when me and the 3 kids came to visit. Now, only 2 of my children went into the mines because Tilly didn't want to, so I sat with Tilly while the other 2 went on the history tour through the mine, and they came back full of tales of paranormal activity. They'd heard footsteps up and down the tunnels, they'd heard footsteps walking around them even though it was only the 2 of them with a tour guide. They'd heard metal banging in the tunnels, and the tour guide admitted that yes, actually, there was often footsteps and metal sounds and paranormal activity around the site and in the mine itself. So much so that I was told that the site has its very own paranormal investigator on site, and they run paranormal evenings for which they've won awards for here. So it's with great excitement I return today with no children in tow, so I know I can go through the mines today. I spoke to more staff about paranormal activity and was told that there are constant shadow figures that walk past the cafe windows that all the staff have seen, and also tales of visitors coming off the mine tours questioning where the child is that held their hand, the child that was scared, only to find out that there was no child booked on the tour. So I was really keen to explore this site where mothers and fathers and daughters and sons all worked. By the time children were 8 years old, they were old enough to work in the mine. The women would work above in the sorting houses, and the life expectancy here was only mid-30s to 40s. It was a hard life, but as I was walking around this beautiful setting and looking at the hills around, the overwhelming feeling I got was it is a hard life, but we loved it, and I couldn't understand it. I thought I was coming here to pick up a soul story of heartbreak and injury and hardship. And yet, as I walked around and looked at the tools and looked at the mountains and looked at the river, I just got this overwhelming feeling of love and friendship and community, a community that we don't have anymore, like people who have each other's backs, friendships. It was strange and overwhelming, and I couldn't drop that feeling. So it was unexpected. I wasn't expecting that at all. I was expecting a story of somebody who'd been injured, and there are stories here of deaths in the mine, but as I looked at this beautiful countryside, that isn't what I was picking up. I was surprised, really surprised. So I wondered how that feeling of happiness and community would pan out as the day went on. And yes, I know this isn't really a ghost hunt, and none of this is scientifically provable, but as I wandered around the site, I felt at peace with just feeling the energy of those stories soaking in, feeling the history of this place. This where the giant water wheel once turned, that was equally as much above ground as it was below the walls. How incredibly massive would this water wheel have been? And yeah, it was just incredible to see. I walked around these old buildings here since 1860, just incredible. These are the original buildings. This was the building where the generator would have been kept. These are buildings where the miners would have lined up to collect their pay. The end room is a blacksmithing room, just incredible. I wandered around the back of the site and came to this tunnel, which I thought was quite strange. These are the windows where the shadow figures are seen continually walking past the cafe, which are the windows on the left. So I picked up no energy really here. Look, this is the little museum. Things felt a bit weirder in here, I have to say. Yeah, just the energy of all the old mining equipment just seemed odd. It just is incredible, all the information and the old pictures and all the machinery that they've still got. Now, the mine actually flooded, and a lot of these artefacts have been recovered from underwater, preserved because they've been in water and not part of the air. And I just think it's amazing that wood can survive because it's in water. You can see an aerial here of the site from above as well. It is just the most fascinating place to visit, just to know that all the miners' hands would have been on this machinery. Just completely incredible. Within this museum there is a story of one miner dying using a piece of equipment, so there have been deaths here. I left the museum and then came out to visit this tunnel, and it just felt really spooky walking up here because look guys, it's a spooky tunnel. And as I got nearer the door at the end, I did hear some strange noises, but it could have been the kiddies' tour set up inside. So yes, weird noise coming from the mine shaft. Not the last, I have to say, but I do know that that tunnel is used for the little kids tour, and who knows, the tour could have been started already, although I was early morning before the tours had started. So I can't explain that without going on that tour and debunking. So for now, I am leaving that as debunked. So this is the top of the site. The building in front of me is where the women and the children would have worked, sorting through the ore and the different things. There is the ore crusher building over the bridge as well, which has some horrendous tales of injury there. And the site goes all the way up to the top forest, which I never went to today. I just don't know what got into me. I completely forgot to explore to the very top of the site. So I am going to turn left here over that little bridge to walk past the ore crusher room, which I go in later on, the one with that big green door. Now, I think the energy around the ore crusher room as well feels charged, shall we say. It just feels charged to me. And once I came home and started piecing this video together, I did some research, and there are videos of paranormal investigations inside that room revealing different spirits, one called Glyn and one called David, more aggressive spirits within the building. But honestly, this isn't the energy that I was picking up here at all. I was picking up no aggressiveness at all in the energy around the site. In fact, it was just the opposite, and I was really surprised. I thought there would be residual trauma here from how hard the life was, but I was getting something totally different and totally unexpected. What I did before my tour started, I still had some time to kill. I went and sat by those cafe windows, got my Barbara Walker tarot out, and just decided to just pull a story with my tarot cards and just see what story would emerge. I invited any spirits around me to come and use my tarot cards to tell the story that they want told today. This is very gentle spirit connection. This isn't ghost hunting. This isn't scientific. This isn't demanding voices. This isn't demanding anything lights up lights. This is just a gentle sit with my tarot deck, inviting a spirit to tell a story. I know this isn't scientific. I know that there is no provable aspect of this, but if, like me, you believe in the power of tarot, then I just think it's a beautiful, gentle way to interact with a site. So let's just see what comes out. The Eight of Swords, the anxiety card. On this card we see a soldier weary of war, and I think weariness is the biggest energy of this card. The soldier's slumped over, unable to face even the sunset. A vulture awaits, looking on, hovering. The grey horse, a death symbol, used to signify carrying Norse warriors off to the sunset land. This really is a card that speaks of the reality of a miner's life in a lead mine, lead poisoning, continually damp conditions, hard labour, weariness. This is the truth of the life here, and I felt that we did indeed have the voice of somebody who knew what it was like to work in this mine, the truth and the anxiety of the harsh realities of this life. So no matter what story emerges next, this reality cannot be overlooked, and I think this card honours the reality of the anxiety and weariness of this life. So after that card, I asked for confirmation of, were you a miner here? Did you work here? Did you work in the mines? Is that who I am speaking to? And the card that I got, the imagery on it, I don't think it could have been clearer, because the Hermit card got pulled out, and this card shows a man beginning a journey into the dark, carrying what looks like a miner's lantern. And although the miner's life here was not so much a quest for enlightenment or unconscious exploration, it was more a practical quest into the dark to find lead. However, the imagery of this card is stunning. We've got the miner's lantern, we've got the metal staff used for working the walls, we've got the rock underfoot, and we've got a man on a journey into the dark. I think our miner has stepped forward. So excited now that I am actually in the presence of a miner. I asked just for the story to be told. Tell me about your life. The first card that came out was the Magician card. Now the Magician card has a table of all the elements. You've got air, you've got water, you've got fire, and you've got earth represented. And I felt immediately that I was being told that this was a life where all of the elements dominate. Water, these mines flood. A lot of the lower levels are completely flooded. So water is a big element in these mountains. Of course, earth speaks for itself in a miner's life. And air, that constant awareness of fresh air and getting out from underground. And also fire. On the tour that I then walked on, I was told that it gets very hot in the mines, and the lower down they dug, the hotter it got. They were very superstitious, the miners in those days. They believed that they were digging closer and closer to hell. In fact, anybody injured or at risk of dying from an injury in the mine, they would do anything to get that person out, because they believed if you actually died in the mine, you were so close to hell because of the heat that you would be immediately grabbed and taken to hell. So fire was a huge element of life, and that's suspicion here. Also, the trickster element of the magician hit me straight away with the colours in this card. The yellow and green that's prevalent really reminded me of the building I was looking at sitting opposite. This the very place where the miners lined up to get their wages, possibly from somebody standing behind a table like the magician in the card. Are we being told here that they were constantly feeling tricked and not getting paid their dues? It was very much a them and us situation. Or is it talking about the actual building itself? The yellow bricks were purely for show at the front of the building to trick people and investors into thinking the mine was richer than it really was. The sides and the backs of the buildings looked totally different. These yellow bricks were really expensive. They were purely to dupe people into paying more money into the mine to keep it going. There was very much smoke and mirrors and trickery around keeping the miner's life going and the mine open. So the next card to come out in our soul story is the Six of Swords with the keyword of passage. It depicts a group of 6 men on a journey into a rock passage. It couldn't be clearer with the keyword passage as well. I think the 6 men on a journey into water speaks of the camaraderie of the miners working together in groups. It also speaks of how big an element water is at this site. Like I said, the lower levels continually were flooding. There is water everywhere at this site. The guidebook says of this card that it is a passage towards a dark, unknowable future with difficulties to be faced before eventual success. Again, there is no shying away from the fact that the miners knew that this was dangerous. Every day they went with their group of friends into the darkness to face whatever it is they needed to face. There was an awareness of the dangers. There was an awareness of the element of water constantly knocking away at their health, and yet there's that group feeling, that camaraderie, that feeling of community that I felt so much walking around the site. The next card that came out, I wasn't aware at the time how impactful this card would be. When it came out, I saw the keyword of challenge and thought this is talking about the miners challenging life again. The guidebook says that we are being menaced from above by something that might fall. We can see that moon shape. And of course, the miners were continually menaced by the thought of a roof collapse or an accident in the mine. It was something that we're told in the guidebook needs constant vigilance and effort to guard against. So this really does depict the miners' action with the fear of the roof collapse above. But at the time I couldn't work out what the flames below were. It was only later on the actual tour where our guide talked about the suspicions at the time that the miners had, that with every level they went down they were digging closer and closer to hell's flames, and some miners left the job when they felt they'd got too close to hell. But this card really made total sense. Challenged from above, the threat of collapse, of something landing on your head. Threat from below, the flames of hell and digging too close to hell. This sums up the challenges above and below for the miner in our soul story. Now, the final card that came out in this reading, I was so pleased to see, because I feel this last card validates that feeling of the energy I was picking up before I sat down to pull cards. As I'd walked to the site, the only feeling I kept getting was one of real love for this site, real love for this life, and of a happiness, a community that was happy. It was a story beyond the normal story of the hardship of a miner's life, and it talked more about the community that was built. And look, the 9 of Cups came out with the keyword happiness. I just think this validates that story, that it isn't just about the hardship of the work. There was something else. Half of the miner's time was spent farming, and the community of cottages that would be built, they all farmed for different things, and they all shared their produce, they shared the food, and they shared their skills. It was a group effort, it was a community effort, it was a community life where friendship ruled. And I think that mound of green grass where the miners would have rested on breaks is also mirrored in the card, this mound of grass beyond the water. Look at that, it literally mirrors the card itself. And I almost wanted to cry at this real clear confirmation mirroring the landscape that I was actually looking at, that there was a double-edged sword here. It was hard, but it was equally wonderful as well. So I then looked at the underlying energy and I saw the Star card, a card of hope. Again, the soul story reiterating that there was hope in this life too. The Three of Cups, friendship. There was friendship under these mining arches, but an acknowledgement of the work and the chances that the miners took, with this Wheel of Fortune card, a wheel mirroring the wheels that I was sitting surrounded by. So with the imagery of the tarot wheel in my mind mirroring the miners' wheels around this site, let's begin our tour. It was a tour where the presentation we were given in life at the mine just absolutely mirrored what the reading had given me, like the challenges, like the women and the children here that worked in the ore crushing room, losing fingers regularly, and of all of these, look, these original miners' lanterns mirroring that imagery in that hermit card. It was extraordinary to walk around and to see my tarot reading literally materialise in front of my eyes. We were told stories of how, yes, the elements were a huge part of life here. With the mine flooding, this wheelbarrow is hundreds of years old and it's preserved because, although it's wooden, it was underwater. The mine flooded that regularly. As we walked around the site, we were told stories of how the community worked together as a whole, and I just had a feeling of how we've lost that somehow. There is something to mourn the losing of here, even though the work was so hard. Now, this is the top entrance to the mine. You can see the steps going down. And it was only when we entered the mine that I think I picked up anything strange that could have been paranormal. So as we're entering the mine here, I'm going to ask you to keep listening and to keep an open mind for some of the sounds that I picked up. As we entered the mine, all of those messages in the soul story about the elements being a huge part of life, about light and air and the fear of hell's flames and water and like being in the earth and seeing the different layers of the earth, it all kind of hit me how true that was. That fear of a roof collapsing on you or hell beneath you. There is something about getting into the mines that brings the elements to real stark highlights in front of your eyes. Let me play you some of the sounds of the actual mine itself so you can feel that pull of water and the elements. And as I felt overwhelmed by the elements as the miners would, a sing-songy voice from nowhere, inexplicable. I was at the back of the group and nobody in front of me seemed to react. The noise had seemed to come from behind me. So as we continued down the steps. Nobody mentioned it. And as our tour guide went back to collect a lantern, I asked and nobody had heard anything. But there was definite sing-songy music. I wondered whether it wasn't confirmation that, yeah, this place was full of the elements. It was hard work. It was dangerous, but there was time for song. It was this double-edged sword of challenge and happiness that we got in our reading. It was an incredible start to the exploration of these amazing passages and tunnels. So that first sing-songy sound is the only sound that was out of place, that didn't fit in with the sound of the cave, that didn't fit in with the sound of the people talking on the tour, that I actually physically heard. All the other sounds I'm about to share with you are things that I discovered when I reviewed my footage later, and they still all have that same sing-songy quality to them, but none of the rest of these sounds were audible actually in real life. In the very centre of the tunnels we get to this main mine shaft. Only one level is now above water. The rest of the mine, going 6 layers deep, is now flooded. The miners would have accessed the mines here and the different levels of the mine via ladders, and this is where the key ghost story of these mines lives. The story of Billy, a 12-year-old boy who fell off a ladder in this shaft and died at the bottom. A tragic story of lives lost young. That sound was picked up as I walked out of that main shaft area and stood in the very centre of all of the passages, and it just makes me think that perhaps it sounded quite young. It's sing-songy, it's young. Could this have been the voice of Billy? We continued on along the passages, hear the sound so that you can get a feel of the natural sound of the cave. For me, that strange noise sounds totally different to the sound of the group members speaking, but of course we're in cave and sound can be distorted. What do you think? All things are possible. Here we pause on the steps coming up and out of the mine to be told that the gap that we're seeing in the wall looks out onto the water in the wall where the great wheel would have been housed. As I'm taking that in, I am conscious that I'm getting weird vibes from behind me, but I think being back of the group in a haunted mine, you're going to get that. And here, look, this is peeping out into where the great wheel is. These sounds as we exited the mine shaft just sounded like birds to me, but what birds would be nesting down here? And then again.
That's actually a trophy. That's actually a trophy. That's actually a trophy.
And that was it. We then exited through the door and back out into the daylight. And that feeling of that relief of air and light the power of the elements in this life really came through in the tour and just mirrored all the messages of the reading. The massively exaggerated and heightened impact of all of the elements on the souls that lived and worked here, it really came home to me just with that short walk through the mine and that feeling of the heat building as we went lower, and that superstition of hellfires beckoning, with all of the weariness of the job and the dangers of the job and the accidents and the children losing fingers and falling down mine shafts. The whole feeling of the tarot reading before was mirrored in the exploration of the mine. The tour guide also talked to us about a lot is made of how poorly paid the miners were, but he went on to say, but it shouldn't be talked about because they didn't want for anything. They had nothing to spend their money on. They worked as a community together to grow all their food, and they all took on different jobs so nobody got too overwhelmed. They would do an 8-hour shift at the mine all together and then go and farm the land all together in their cottages. And it was like a community spirit, and again that feeling of friendship and community that came through in not only the tarot reading but the energy of the site was mirrored in the tour guide's words. It just all felt really impactful all the way through, that the story here is it was both things. It was danger, it was weariness, it was mine owners sometimes doing the dirty on the workers, but it was also fun, it was community, it was connection, it was friendship, and it was happiness within a world that was really, really challenging and full of superstition and full of danger. I really feel like this tarot reading told me everything that I needed to know before entering the mine, and those strange noises picked up, who knows, mines can distort sound, of course they can, but it just seemed really unusual, and it seemed fitting that the one thing I really heard was a sing-song voice underneath the earth amidst the challenges. Thanks guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.